So yes, that for those wondering, that is me. I guess I've always been around computers, but I should state that I have 0 CVEs associated with my name. I am not an elite hacksaw. I didn't grow up in a BBS, but I deeply, deeply care about the mission and the talent pool that comes here. And I want to show a little bit of vulnerability for our collective benefit, and I hope I don't mess it up. But I really want to connect with everybody in this room in this year, our 25th year coming to Vegas as a community. We've been doing this for a quarter of a century. And I think it's time to face some tough choices. I have made some choices. My choices have had consequences. But this talk isn't about me. It's not even about the people I've upset. It's about you and what you want for the next 25 years. So part of the abstract is I am very worried about the point in history we find ourselves. What we first started as a hobby for challenging curiosity kind of turned into our profession. And when we weren't looking, our profession has now turned into something critical to 7 billion humans on this planet. And one of the things we're trying to do is a small group of us have started going to the policy community and getting outside the echo chamber and trying to translate our interests and our knowledge into public policy, safety critical industries, et cetera, is that we are placing so much dependence on undependable things that we are opening ourselves to accidents and adversaries where any single mistake like a WannaCry or any single actor like Junaid Hussain can have a profound impact on our public safety, our civil liberties, our way of life. Now, I have made a lot of enemies over the last 4 years since we started I Am the Cavalry. It was surprising to me. It was confounding to me. I'm sure I've made a lot of mistakes. But one of the things I've come to learn is while we say we're a community, we're not a community. We're a community of communities. And every single one of us has different motives. So we try to oversimplify this by saying what drives white hats, right? I say there's protectors that want to make the world a safer place. There's puzzlers that do this for challenging curiosity. That's why most of us got into this in the first place. There's prestige that do it for glory or recognition or for making a name for themselves on a particular topic. There's profit and professionalism that do this to advance their career or their earning potential. And there's protests that do it for or against some sort of ideological cause. Now, most of you are not so simple that one of these is your motive. For me, I'm first and foremost a protector. I want to make the world a safer place. And second, I like hard problems. So which of these are you and what drives you? And why do you stay in this industry? But anybody that tries to cast aspersions, they're usually promoting what they care about onto you. So I'm going to give a very brief state of affairs as far as the public policy world goes. You guys know this, but we tend to summarize the things we've been promoting as wherever bits and bytes meet flesh and blood. This is our cars, our medical devices, our hospitals, our critical infrastructure. And I'm just going to remind some people some things we said 4 years ago when we launched I Am the Cavalry, right? The idea was we know something really, really bad is going to happen first. We know people will have to die. The question was, yes, we'll figure this out eventually, but can we be safer sooner if we work together with teammates outside the norm, outside the echo chamber, and outside the hacker community? And Andrea Matwishin, during one of our first meetings, she pointed out this particular historical event. Does anybody know what this is? So this is a river on fire, right? It's the Cuyahoga River. If you've ever been in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's exactly where that is. This pollution was so bad in the Cuyahoga River, it caught on fire and stayed on fire. Like, how bad do things have to get in cybersecurity before we have that tipping point that says, you know, maybe we should stop polluting and maybe we should do something like the Clean Water Act. Maybe we should do something different. But the sad story about this is it didn't catch on fire once. This was the 22nd time it had caught on fire across a 70-year period before someone took a picture and put it in Time magazine. And eventually you got the EPA and eventually you got the Clean Water Act. But some of those regulations actually overreached and backfired because you waited until there was a crisis moment. So one of the ways we put this is everyone says, what's our big event that's going to cause something to change? And I don't think there's going to be one. I think we're going to have a series of very painful failures, and eventually we'll get to an inflection point. The problem is if we wait for this, It could compromise our liberties. It could increase surveillance. It could hurt the economy. It could criminalize this room's talent pool. So when we talk about Cuyahoga Rivers on fire, I'd like to suggest that last year, and this room knows this is just a thumbnail of what we show other people. How many of us knew the power grids could be hacked? Well, now the public knows, right? This isn't about what we know. Now the public knows. How many of us know you can use Shodan to log in with fixed maintenance passwords on safety critical infrastructure like an electric dam or a water facility? Well, now it's been done, right? And now the DOJ is unsealing documents that Iranian hackers have done this. How many of us knew hospitals were vulnerable? Well, Hollywood Presbyterian shut down patient care for a week. People coming in ambulances bleeding had to go up the street in LA traffic to go to a different facility because they could not provide patient care. And it wasn't even on purpose. A single Java flaw in a single device shut down patient care for a week. Now, when these attacks happen, we like to think we'll just respond quickly, but I think it's going to be more like the Deepwater Horizon spill, where it's going to be on the news every single night. And when you have a loss of life or a crisis of confidence in the public to trust hospitals, they're going to react, and they're going to legislate, and they're going to regulate. And if we haven't gotten there first to inject some clue, we may not like what they do. Now, one of those moments was the Mirai botnet. And I thought hospitals were going to scare the bejesus out of Congress people. But it turned out it was actually Mirai. Because we've been saying for years that if we regulate IoT, we might stifle innovation or hurt the economy. And then with the Mirai botnet, with this long tail of low-cost, low-hygiene devices, they saw that a failure to regulate IoT is going to stifle innovation and hurt the economy. The internet was down for a Friday. So that got the attention of the private sector, and now there's serious discussion about regulating some form of minimum standards for IoT. In fact, there's a rumor there's a bill coming this week while we're here on IoT. So that tsunami of technical debt is going to catch up with us, and we're going to get something. The question is it going to make it better or is it going to make it worse? And then no one talks about these, but Mirai, all they did was a DDoS. There's a different botnet that's actually bricking the devices. And if you think of Mirai right now as $100 cameras, what made it work? There's three things that made Mirai work: internet connection, fixed credentials, and unpatchable. Now, I just described most of the multi-million-dollar medical equipment in hospitals. There's nothing stopping the next Mirai from being infusion pumps hooked up to human beings. And if someone goes around bricking those, people are going to die. And then just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the WannaCry attack, without trying to, took out 65 hospitals in the UK in a single day. 65 hospitals. So if one hospital loses patient care, you send ambulances up the street. When 20% of your national capacity of health delivery goes down, people died. We keep saying, well, no one's going to fix anything until people died. WannaCry killed people. How do we know this? We know that there's a New England Journal of Medicine study that shows on the day of the Boston Marathon, on average, your ambulance ride is 3 minutes and 40-something seconds longer. And the mortality rate, because of 3 minutes extra in an ambulance, had a statistically significant increase in death rate. So if one hospital's route can hurt patient care and survivor rates, what do you think 20% of the country's rate did? And what really bothered me is on day 5 of them dealing with their attack, those Ariana Grande bombings happened in Manchester, UK. And if any extra people died because of diminished or delayed patient care, because there was SMB exposed to the internet on a patchable vulnerability, we've got to do better. Now, we also worked on a healthcare cybersecurity task force for Congress, because Congress is starting to ask these questions, and yes, they use the word cyber. And a year into this thing, we thought it was a lot worse than any of us expected. So let me just summarize the graphic we had on the very first page. We had about 13 things that scared the ever-living bejesus out of us, and they should scare the bejesus out of you as well. But the number one problem is we found about 85% of the hospitals in the US don't have a single qualified security person. Not one. There's no one there to do a patch. There's no one to do segmentation and isolation. There's no one there to receive the alert from InfraGard or from the FBI. There's nobody there. Most of our hospitals have 20 or fewer employees, and 0 of those are going to be cybersecurity people. Number 2, they have real plague of legacy unsupported operating systems. Windows XP is often a best case. This thing is not only past its end of life, its successor Vista is past end of life. So we have much harder to defend things that affect 1/6 of our economy. Number three, meaningful use requirements drove premature and hyperconnectivity. So everything's connected to everything else. So the blast radius is one compromise of one device takes out a whole hospital. So these things are way over connected to each other, and it's kind of our fault. Now we know from Hollywood Presbyterian and now from WannaCry that a single flaw in a single device can affect patient care. It's not about a loss of data. Everyone talks about HIPAA. I love my privacy. I'd like to be alive to enjoy it. And this is no longer about protecting our data. It's about protecting life-saving services. And then lastly, Billy Rios and some others found that the average device had over 1,000 CVEs in it. So no one's at the hospital defending the network. They're defending XP if they were trying. They're over-connected to each other and reachable from the outside world. A single flaw in a single device can take out a hospital, and the average device gives you 1,000 chances to do that. There were 1,446 in one particular device. This should bother everybody here. And the talk is not meant to be a downer, but this is the situation we find in 2017. And I made a lot of people angry saying this, but at its face value, is it untrue? You know, can we sort of promote to industry that there's no free lunch? And if you really can't afford to add more security, maybe we can't connect everything to everything else. In fact, when we launched the Cavalry 4 years ago, our problem statement was as follows. We said our dependence on connected technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it. So when you're faced with that, you can do two things. You can make it more dependable, which is really, really hard. Or you can depend upon it less. And right now we're choosing neither. And it's adding to our exposure. So 4 years ago here, and I'm very grateful to Banshee and to Jack and the BSides family, they gave us a platform to try a crazy, crazy experiment and launch I Am the Cavalry to try to do something different. And this is not about that movement. It's about what we encountered on the experiment and why I think more of you should try a similar one. But the thing is, I'm really scared. We've had a lot of victories over the last 4 years. But what we were saying might happen 4 years ago here in this room is actually happening. The very things we've said we were concerned about are manifesting. And some of the fixes for these are going to take 10 years from when we decide to start. We don't have 10 years anymore. And again, back to the Cuyahoga River, we've had several fires. If we don't get our act together and decide who we want to be, how we're going to interact with the outside world, and make sure we're putting the right clue in front of the right policymakers, we're going to end up with a response that criminalizes what we do or makes it harder to actually help them, or ends up hurting our business models. So if you don't want to react to something, then we need to sculpt it and shape it. So then I ask you, and this is the part that I've been dreading, but we have to take a hard look at who we are. We do some amazing things, and we have an amazing culture. We also have some less desirable anti-patterns that hold us back. And I'm going to name and shame not people, but patterns that hurt us and make us less than we need to be. Raise your hand if you've got imposter syndrome. Come on, more. We make it really, really hard for new voices or for humble voices to contribute in this industry. And the reason I'm willing to do this and push through some of this is because, not that I have infinite healing power, but I really care about this, and I know the B-Sides sub-tribe really cares as well. But here we go. You kind of have to name your demons if you want to loosen their grip over you. So here's some of the demons that I guarantee you most of you encountered one or more of these. And I'm hoping that we're not going to attack the people or the sins. I want to attack the sins, not the sinners. I love most of the people in this tribe. I've upset many of the people in this tribe, and I'm about to potentially upset some more of them. But the intent is not to upset them. The intent is to get us to be our best. So one of the forms of hate we encounter, people don't necessarily want change, is no matter what you do, people would project into the Rorschach. They would cast their wants and needs and fears onto you. So if somebody cares about prestige, they assume that what we're doing is to be famous. And if somebody cares about money, they think that what we're doing is to enrich ourselves. And everybody's got an opinion, but usually the critique and the criticisms, if you encounter them, say more about the hater than the hated. It doesn't mean that they're not right. It doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to criticism, but a lot of people project onto you what your actual motives are. So there comes a point where you need to be secure in yourself about what are you doing, why are you doing it, and try to push through that. Now, this is an eye chart, but this is the strength of argument pyramid they teach you in debate class or in logic. But essentially, the top of the pyramid is the stuff that actually is a strong counter-argument. At the bottom, it gets down to name-calling, ad hominem, attacking tone. So what do I mean by that? How many times have you heard something that said, well, so-and-so is not wrong, but it shouldn't be them. It should be somebody else, somebody more elite. Or it's not what they said, it's how they said it, right? Have you ever heard that? And my favorite is the ad hominem attack, right? I find that somebody's going to use the strongest argument they can against you. And instead of fearing that now, I've come to a point where if somebody's going to attack the messenger instead of the message, they really don't have a lot of leg to stand on. But these things do hurt, right? You've seen the flame wars, you've seen people tear people down, you've seen the gaslighting. Then there comes the permission thing. Like, if you dare get outside of your swim lane and do something that you're not supposed to do, you can get smacked around pretty hard. Like, well, so-and-so should be on that panel instead. Or, I would prefer if this person did it. Or, pick your favorite rock star, right? But we don't need to ask for permission. Like, who created the approval board and the permission slips for who's allowed to contribute to something that they're concerned about? So at some point, you have to stop looking for permission and just do it. And I think that experiment over the last 4 years is we just decided to tough it out and do it. Plus, isn't it a lot more fun when you don't have permission? We also have the tall poppy problem. Anybody know this one? So there's a groupthink problem that if anybody tries to pick their head up above the crowd, they tend to get sniped. And especially if you don't have permission, especially if you're not elite, especially if you're not a known quantity, if you try to stick your neck out, it tends not to go very well. And that's not isolated to the hacker community, but how many times have we seen this happen where we punish achievement? There's a lesser known one involving crabs. Apparently, if a crab tries to escape a bucket, its friends will make sure it fails. And if it keeps trying to escape the bucket, they will break its legs. And if it persists further, it'll kill the other crab. So hopefully we can be less crabby. Some of these are more benign looking, but I think they actually fuel other things. So if you quote somebody, you'll get screamed at for being a name dropper. But equally, if you don't cite your priors, you'll be screamed at for being a plagiarist. And for some reason, one of the most disappointing patterns in this space is we never cite prior art. I don't know if this started with this notion of everyone being called a name dropper, but we're never going to advance our field if we don't acknowledge the prior work people did. Not because we have to kiss a brass ring, but because we can add and stand on the shoulders of giants like Jack's project, right? We want to take prior work and enhance it or augment it or move it further or take it into a new crowd. So this notion of you're a name dropper if you cite other people might be contributing to some of our other more dangerous effects. But ultimately, I got to the point where the mission was more important to us than the hate. And we started realizing, like, this isn't just hurting us, it's actually hurting the people who are getting mad. Why are they so animated? And it comes to a piece hard-earned where it took me 2 years and I let people get to me for too long, but ultimately Space Throw grabbed my phone and made me download Taylor Swift, right? And I finally got healed around DerbyCon in the second year, where I realized haters gonna hate, they're not bad people. Some people just are afraid of change, or maybe they're motivated differently. And if your mission's important enough to you, you'll just persevere through it. But the problem is, I just talked about the easy patterns. Even after I got through people that I don't know, giving us a hard time, making fun of the mission, you can brush that off. But then I started pissing off people I care about and people that I've been friends with for a decade or more. And it was really unintuitive, but we've got some deep-seated patterns. So back to those motivations. Not everybody's motivated to try to fix healthcare security. Some people are motivated on their topic, or they're motivated on their business, or they like things the way they are, or they've worked hard to make it to the elite class and they want to maintain that position, or they like the walled garden that we have in cybersecurity and don't want us to escape the echo chamber or talk to Congress or use the word cyber. But for whatever their reasons, they're really good people, but we encountered some next order problems. Does anybody know this movie? Anybody not know this movie? Okay. I think one of our less obvious patterns that we've held on to for 25 years is the Highlander fallacy. That for a given topic, there can be only one, and we have to defend our turf on our topic. And the thing is, there's 7 billion humans that are now increasingly exposed to hacks on medical devices or transportation or public infrastructure. One person cannot scale. And if you want to own a topic, I doubt that person wants to own the responsibility for all harm that happens during their watch. Now, for 25 years, this is what we did, and this has been a feature of our culture. And I think you can honor the accomplishments, achievements, and expertise of somebody without holding others down. And the truth is, we need 20 people on each of these topics. We might need 50 people on each of these topics. So we've got to push past the idea that there can be only one. Thanks. So I kept this section short because I didn't know if Allie was going to get into game theory, but she and I need to talk more about game theory. There's a Punnett square in game theory called the prisoner's dilemma, where we're both arrested, and depending on our individual choices, we're going to minimize our jail time or screw over our friend. And whether we meant to or not, I'd like to suggest the first 25 years of our culture has been more defined by the prisoner's dilemma than by an alternative. There's another called the stag hunt, which says if you go hunting on your own, you might catch a rabbit and live to eat and survive another day. And if I hunt on my own, I might catch a rabbit. But if we can put aside our competition and work together, we might take down a stag. And I hope that by naming some of these demons and patterns, we can actually shift from competing with each other to building upon each other. And this is not a platitude. I'd like to say we've been doing this for the last 4 years. Does anybody know who this guy is? You've seen it 1,000 times, but you know who it is? So this is Prometheus. His sin was he stole fire and gave it to mortal man. He empowered everybody. Now his punishment, because our choices have consequences, was he was chained to a rock and had his gizzard eaten out by an eagle every single day, only to heal back and get punished again. So it's not the first time someone tried to change the status quo and met with resistance. But I hope we can get past that. And if you're wondering what the hell is Josh talking about, does anybody recognize this picture? I'll use a more pop culture reference. So in the lore of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what was the old legend? To every generation there was born a Slayer, right? One. But what did she do? They just kept season after season fighting the big bad, losing, dying in a couple cases, and ultimately she took the magic of the one Slayer and democratized and shared that power. So there were many Slayers. And to that, I say it's about time. So I'd like us to encourage sharing and encouragement and empowerment over elitism. And to do that, we have to know who our enemy is. And here's a hint. Your enemy is not in this room. Your enemy is probably not in Vegas this week. We have actual enemies. And the number one enemy we have is time. Again, 4 years ago, we talked about this as a theory. This year, it's happening. The US got incredibly lucky with WannaCry. It barely touched us. We are the most connected and exposed nation, and it would have destroyed us. And if you think we have a lot more time, almost nobody patched the vulnerability that enabled WannaCry. So when Petya and not Petya started circling around, we're still exposed. And our luck's going to run out. They say, what is it? Time is the fire in which we burn. Any moment or minute or hour we waste tolerating some of these anti-patterns, or if you're an imposter and you're afraid to make your contribution, that's a minute we're losing to our actual adversaries. And some of those are pretty freaking scary. I'm shocked at how few of you guys know about Trick. But we made fun of Anonymous. We said they were a bunch of kids and they had no real skill. Well, in Team Poison, Junaid Hussain attacked Tony Blair's website and went to jail. So he wasn't a super elite hacker, but he was talented enough to hack Tony Blair. And some point after getting out of prison in the UK, he moved to Raqqa, Syria, and founded the Cyber Caliphate. He was the number 3 most dangerous man in ISIS when he met a drone strike to the face after DEF CON 2 years ago. Now, he was not very talented, but he was talented enough to use Shodan or Metasploit or default passwords or hack Windows XP over SMB in every one of our hospitals. So when I saw Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital hacked a few months later, I said, thank God Trick is dead. But out of 7 billion humans, do you think they're all going to be nice? Do you think there's nobody with the means, motive, and opportunity to take life? We're out of time. So when we launched at DerbyCon, we did our Constitutional Congress, and Brian Kiefer, Chort, he did a very small talk, I think it was 5 minutes long, on maybe a path forward. It was part of our experiment. And he said, let's think about InfoSec as World of Warcraft. You can start off as a solo, kill a bunch of boars in the wilderness. Maybe you do some pickup groups. If you want to go in a dungeon, you need at least 5. Maybe a healer, maybe a tank, maybe a damage dealer. And for the really hard stuff, it takes a guild. If you want to actually achieve the real intentions of the game and have fun and take down bigger game, back to the stag hunt, it doesn't take diversity. It takes tons of diversity. Gatherers, herbalists, cloth makers, tanks, healers, off healers. It takes a guild. And that's how we decided to conduct ourselves. And boy, did it piss some people off. And yes, occasionally we've had a Leroy Jenkins try to screw everything up. And if Dungeons and Dragons or World of Warcraft isn't your thing, maybe each of these heroes on their own wasn't enough to fight the bigger foe. And if you're still one of the holdouts that actually likes DC, here's your DC one, right? That's for Bob Rudis. Right. But I want to name some of my heroes. And there's obviously some elite hacksters and some A-list rock stars that have had tremendous contributions to our space and really broken through barriers and done first-of-a-kind things, and they absolutely deserve our respect and admiration. But my heroes are a little different. In this experiment where we tried to include people or empower people, my heroes include Jen Ellis. Jen Ellis has probably done more to protect hacker rights to research than any human being on Earth. And I have seen people meet her 4 or 5 times and forget they ever met her. She is the most humble, committed, passionate doer. She generates ideas. She helps us refine our messages. She is the wind beneath so many people's wings. Never wants credit. Still thinks she has no business doing this. And she has probably done more to terraform and prepare the outside world for everything you do well than any other person I can name. My heroes include Bo Woods. Bo Woods wasn't even at the Cavalry launch. He was talking on a different stage here at B-Sides. Didn't even hear it. And in the speaker room, hearing what the mission was, he said, I'm in. Bo, a year and a half ago, quit his job to take less than half pay to move to DC to try to be a voice of reason and try to make sure that we were as prepared as possible in the executive branch and legislative to try to be a clue, an ambassador to try to make everything we care about come true. He didn't do it to get famous. He didn't do it to get rich. He did it because his heart was committed to doing something important He doesn't have a bunch of CVEs associated with the name. He has a psychology degree and a huge heart. And I am eternally grateful to what Bo has done for this mission. My heroes are Audie Hatch. She was a nurse and a med tech in a hospital and new to cyber, but I've learned so much about what hospital cybersecurity is actually going to have to look at. Or Helena, a nurse from Europe who's telling me all the right things to do. So two nurses who still think that they have no business doing this stuff, and I don't know how we would do the mission without them. So thank you. It's Colin Morgan, who works for a medical device maker, and not only is he putting his neck out within his own company to try to be a leader in medical device space, but he's also challenging his peers in industry to do the same. And he's taken a lot of risks, and he's taken a lot of bruises, but every risk he's taken has built trust, and it continued to let him lead within his organization. So much so that I agree with his son, who thinks he's a superhero and saves lives. And Colin, thank you for your partnership. You know, where's Klaus? I'm not going to name every single human being on Earth. Sight unseen, we had never met Klaus from Europe. We bumped into each other at a random event in Amsterdam, and Klaus's volunteerism is to ensure we catch and activate volunteerism. And he puts up with a lot of crap from us, but he has made sure that we have a steady influx of people, and we find a way to empower them and leverage their talents and skills, even if they don't come from elite hacker circles. So thank you, Klaus. Now, my hero list is going to wrap up real soon, but I also have heroes in government. Dr. Suzanne Schwartz of the FDA is doing things that should be impossible in a federal agency. And not only is she here at DEF CON for the 3rd year, but she's continuing to push the edges to help make sure that hackers are treated like a teammate instead of a threat. She put into regulation that she wants every single medical device maker to have a published coordinated vulnerability disclosure to work with white hats. She is helping us contribute to the public good. You're also going to see Alan Friedman from Commerce Department and NTIA. He's driving patching standards and coordinated vulnerability disclosure best practices to terraform and get people ready for this. Where's Alan? Oh, he just left. All right. All right. And there's even a tech staffer from Congress here who's going to show you guys what it looks like tomorrow to see a real congressional testimony in action and how the government's thinking about embracing and amplifying the domestic resource that is you. Jessica Wilkerson. So one of the things I want to say to anybody who's ever wrestled with imposter syndrome, this was hanging on my uncle's wall, right? You guys remember the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Aslan? Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. And because you in this room care about the mission, you're not arrogant to own your skills. You're contributing if you own your skills. And I hinted that there's an apology in this talk. And the apology is, I'm sorry I let those patterns diminish me. And more importantly, I'm sorry I've let those patterns diminish you. Because if time is the enemy, I should have spent more time empowering each of you and working with each of you, and I'm not going to make that mistake anymore. So the idea of working with people that are different than us and better than us is starting to take hold. We tried to target 3 first-of-a-kind policies last year: FDA post-market guidance, the NTIA coordinated disclosure best practices, and the Department of Transportation guidance for connected vehicles. It turned out there were 11. We also worked with DHS on strategic principles for IoT. There was a presidential commission on enhancing national cybersecurity that came out of nowhere. There was a congressional healthcare task force, and members of this room, when called upon, created comments, refined comments, showed up at workshops, tried to be that voice of reason and technical ambassador. And look, most of us don't like public policy. We think the government mostly screws stuff up. But the bottom line is they're going to act with or without us. And we have a much better chance if we're at the table helping them. So here's a few of them, and we're not going to go into them today. Well, we are actually. Jessica's going to go through them in the cavalry track, some of these policy updates. But the one I think this room's most concerned about, whether you knew this or not, and one of the other MVPs, I hope she's here, is Andrea Matwishin, a law professor. There are 18 parts of the federal government that have now enthusiastically, in a 2-year period, endorsed the value of coordinated vulnerability disclosure. And this is thanks to the work of Katie Mazuris, Art Mannion, Andrea Matwishin, Jen Ellis, Craig Smith, Jay Radcliffe, anybody who testified, tried to be that ambassador and put a happy face on this. This includes the Digital Millennium Copyright Act having an exemption that it is no longer illegal through October of next year to do white hat research, acting in good faith on cars, medical devices, or consumer electronics. We are turning the tide on looking at hackers as criminals. And we're going to go through some of those later today. But I think one of the crowning achievements of this crazy experiment to push past elitism and look at inclusion, we met 2 hackers in the DEF CON lounge that were med students on our 1-year anniversary, Christian Dameth and Jeff Tully. And these guys, while in med school, said, you know what we should do? We should take everything we know about the body and medical science and everything we know about hacking, and we should do a real-life clinical hacking simulation. And a few months ago in Arizona, we did that. My friends and family said, what were you guys doing in Arizona? And I said, we killed 3 people. But what we did is, for the very first time, using real science and real physicians that were unaware of what was going on, we did 3 clinical hacks of 3 different device types in a normal training simulation where they used professional actors and very expensive dummies. And the hacked devices, which we're going to show some raw video of later today, included a hacked insulin pump that causes a car crash. And instead of realizing it was an insulin overdose that caused the crash, the delayed diagnosis allowed the patient to code. The second one was a bedside infusion pump. And instead of giving the dose that was meant to take 3 hours, it gave 3 hours of medicine in 1 minute, causing a cardiac arrest. And these physicians had to react to something they didn't understand and weren't trained for. In fact, the toxicologist that did that one actually figured out what was going on, but didn't realize the device was hacked, so administered the antidote using the same compromised device. But the really sexy, scary one was a defibrillator pacemaker, where every minute on the minute, it was giving an electroshock to the actor, and he was screaming in agony. And none of the things they're trained to do, like put a magnet on the chest to go to a factory default firmware safe mode, didn't work. And the thing about this and the way the heart works is, if you're getting zapped every minute, it's like Russian roulette. And every so often, it'll cause asystole, and the guy codes and has a heart attack. The patient died, I think, 4 times while they were trying to figure out what to do, which was the intersection of hacking, and actual science. And ultimately, they had to wheel in the dummy, crack open the chest, cut in, have the blood ooze out, and cut the lead wires while there's electroshocks in an active surgical field. And just when the guy went to catch his breath, he realized, oh, wait, the pacemaker is necessary to keep this guy alive. So they had to do external pacing. But this very visceral thing, told in a very non-FUD way through ABC, is finally going to scale and reach other hospitals that said, you know, I thought we'd be okay, but we're not trained for this. We have no idea what's going on. It's probably time we start working this into our differential diagnosis. And the goal isn't to scare people away from connected medicine. We have to push connected medicine. Modern medicine is way safer than anything else. And even if we lose a single person to data hacking, that's fine for all the lives we're going to save, except for the fact that a crisis of confidence from these organizations or from the public is going to postpone and scare that away. So again, I ask you as we close here, who do we want to be? What do we want to encourage? Do we want to encourage helping people over their imposter syndrome? Or do we want to put them down because they're not elite enough? Do we want to attract people to the industry just to scare them away again? Or do we want to find some way to make the best use of a nurse, a congressperson, a politician, a lawyer, a project manager? Every single one of you came from something else. And we need the best of what you can do to be the best of what we can be. And look, I'm not asking you to join in with the cavalry safety mission. There's privacy issues, there's other issues, there's Wassenaar, which I don't touch with a 10-foot pole. There's a lot of issues that affect this community. So my fight might not be your fight. Morgan Marquis-Bois says this. But you have something you care about. So what I want to do in closing is get beyond elitism. It got us this far. We have a lot of interesting characters and diversity and history. I think what's going to get us to the next round is a shift to empowerment of everybody. So I'd like to paint a stark choice. We can either hold on to this idea there can be only one in all the other patterns, but for my sake, I kind of want to kill a dragon. It's going to take trust, empathy, and a guild. I hope you're part of that guild. We can be safer sooner if we find the best in each of us, and that has to start today. Thank you.